White House is doing a victory lap tonight following new figures about the nation's economic outlook.
A new jobs report is out, the first to reflect President Trump's first full month in office. But how much credit can he really take? KCAL9 political reporter Bryan is here with White House reaction. Dave.
Yeah, and the debate is over who gets the credit for this, right? The February numbers on new jobs and lower unemployment during the first full month of Donald Trump's presidency were music to the administration's ears. But how much of the congrats should go to Mr. Trump for his focus on jobs and the economy, and how much should go to former President Obama, who led an 8-year recovery from the 2008 recession, a recovery that still continues today? The cheers and smiles on Wall Street are a reflection not only of the high-flying stock markets these days, but of a new monthly jobs report from the Labor Department that shows 235,000 jobs were added and the unemployment rate in February fell to 4.7%. But these numbers were generated in the same way the numbers were generated during the Barack Obama presidency, which were denounced last year by candidate and then president-elect Donald Trump.
The unemployment number, as you know, is totally fiction. I hear 5.3% unemployment. That is the biggest joke there is in this country. Don't believe those phony numbers when you hear 4.9 and 5% unemployment. The number's probably 28, 29, as high as 35. In fact, I even heard recently 42%.
And that's why this exchange took place at the Friday White House briefing with smiles.
Does the president believe that this jobs report was accurate and a fair way to measure the economy?
Yeah, I talked to the president prior to this, and he said, to quote him very clearly, they may have been phony in the past, but it's very real now.
But it's no laughing matter for industrial workers across America, like those who work at this San Diego County aerospace parts manufacturer, where they're hiring again.
He controls both of these machines.
By the end of March, the chief operating officer says the workforce here will have increased by 12% since New Year's. Primarily, he says, because of confidence in President Trump's business-friendly White House.
There's a lot of optimism and belief that we will be seeing it not only 2017 but the next few years continuing to increase and bringing jobs and manufacturing back here to the U.S. that might have been done outside of the U.S. in the past. Urban's
company is not alone, and while more than half the new jobs are in the service sector, 132,000, there were also strong hiring gains in construction, manufacturing, and agriculture last month. And many economists believe those who had given up on finding a job are now back in the market.
Particularly people who are prime working age, that's people who are 25 to 54, are starting to come back into the job market and look for work. That's a very important development. These people are the backbone of the job market.
So who gets the credit? The former president whose term expired in late January, or the current president whose first full month on the job was February? The debate was on CNN Friday evening.
So these are expectations about future tax cuts that Donald Trump promised, about the rolling back of regulations, which he can do naturally. And it's quite right for there to be more confidence, more hiring, and the labor force participation rate went up. More Americans moved into the labor force.
We've added 16 million jobs since the recession ended. Okay, so we got 84 months where we had job creation. And now under Donald Trump, they've had 1 month. And he's like as I say, the backup quarterback came in the last 30 seconds of the game. So they put him in so he could tell his mom that he got to play in the Super Bowl. And he's telling everybody that he won the game.
Well, nonetheless, this is a good start for President Trump, no matter who gets the credit. And he still has a long way to go, of course, to fulfill some of his campaign promises on the economy, namely to fuel a 4% economic growth rate and create millions of new jobs in America. It will take a lot more months like February to get that job done.
Well, Dave, do you think the numbers in this report will actually have an impact on workers' paychecks at some point?
I think it's certainly possible. I mean, that's the question that some unions and non-union workers are asking now. They're starting to ask, when do we get a raise? Because for many American workers, it's been 8 years or more since they've seen any pay increase. And the percentage of workers who either have a job now or are back looking for one is the highest it's been in a year. And that means the table may be set for bigger paychecks. Some recruiting companies also are now saying they're seeing shortages of skilled workers in some areas, which is putting more pressure on companies to raise wages and improve benefits in order to fill those positions. positions. Jeff, Lena, back to you.